Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Tuesday, February the 14th, 2023. We're looking at the gospel reading for this past Sunday, Matthew 8, 1 through 17. This theme for our worship on Sunday was Jesus heals. And so what we have there in Matthew 8, 1 through 17 are three healing stories. With the exception of the middle healing, the healing of the centurion's slave, both Mark and Luke also have all of these same healing stories. Mark leaves out the story of the healing of the centurion's slave. But the other thing is that they're in a different order. Matthew purposely puts them like boom, 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 one after another, obviously to make a point of Jesus's healing ministry. In Mark, the healing of Peter's mother-in-law happens in chapter 1, verses 29 to 34, but the healing of the leper doesn't happen until verses 40 to 45 of chapter 1. In Luke, it's even different. The healing of Peter's mother-in-law, like in Mark, happens first in Luke 4, but the healing of the leper happens in Luke 5, and the healing of the centurion's slave happens in verse 7. So they have the same accounts, basically, with the one exception, but in different order. The other thing is that the wording, there's four places where a word for heal or cure is used. So in verse 7, Jesus says to the centurion about the slave, I will come and cure him. The word there is therapeuo. Occurs about 44 times in the New Testament. 38 of the times it's translated as heal. 5 times it's translated as cure, and once it's translated as serve, which is sort of interesting because one of the definitions of the word is to serve, but more often it's used to denote healing or to cure. Then in verse 8 of Matthew 8, the centurion says to Jesus, "Oh, just speak the word, my servant will be healed." Here, it's a different word. It's not therapeuo. It's the word. It's the word iaomai, and that can mean heal or cure as well. But also, the interesting thing about that word is it can also mean to be made whole. So I kind of find it interesting that the two words that can be translated either heal or cure, the one can mean to serve, and the other one can mean to be made whole. I think that's interesting. We're going to talk more about the difference or the similarities between healing and curing at the end of the week, I think on Saturday. But just wanted to introduce that we have some healing stories here. We often think of healing and curing as being the same thing. I'm going to point out through a story later in the week that they're not necessarily the same, but we do tend to use them interchangeably. The other theme here is that Jesus responds to people's needs. He doesn't hesitate. My sermon theme was about an outcast, an outsider, and the overlooked. In each case, Jesus, responds immediately, regardless of who the person is or where they came from. There's a wonderful story about Mother Teresa. I quoted her in my sermon as well, but this is one of my favorite stories as well. She once was told that there was a poor Hindu family in Calcutta who had been starving for many, many days. So Mother Teresa, of course, a Roman Catholic nun, went to visit them and brought a large bag of rice for them to eat. And the interesting thing, the reason why Mother Teresa tells this story is she was surprised to see that the mother immediately went and opened up the bag and divided the rice into 2 equal portions and went out with the bundle and came back a few minutes later. And when Mother Teresa inquired where she was, she said that she had given it to her Muslim neighbor. And why she had done this, why did you do this, Mother Teresa asked. And the woman replied, my family can manage with half of that rice that is in this bag. My neighbor's family has several children who are also very, very hungry. Um, so this idea of just being willing to cross boundaries, Jesus certainly did that with outcasts and outsiders and people who were so often overlooked. Here we have that example being followed by Mother Teresa, a Christian helping a Hindu, the Hindu helping the Muslim. That there's no the things that we often use to divide us and the boundaries that we create mean nothing in the life of faith. But it can be overwhelming at times. I just want to finish on another Mother Teresa story. Mark Hatfield, the late senator from Oregon, once visited Calcutta and visited Mother Teresa and the so-called House of Dying, where sick children were cared for in their last days, and there was a dispensary where the poor lined up by the hundreds to receive medical attention. And whether watching Mother Teresa minister to these people and feeding and nursing, especially those who've been left by others simply to die, Hatfield was overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the suffering that she and her coworkers faced daily. And he finally asked her, "How can you bear the load without being crushed by it?" And Mother Teresa replied, "My dear Senator, I am not called to be successful. I'm called to be faithful." As Jesus' followers, we are in a world where there are hurting people, suffering people, people who need all sorts of healing. And it's our job, our calling, if you will, to respond. We can't solve all the world's problems, but we're not called to solve all the world's problems. As Mother Teresa said, we're there to be faithful. Well, we'll continue talking about healing and curing and being faithful in the days to come. Hope you can join us. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.